They're engines with extra metal panels to better handle air resistance, increase top speeds, and in some cases help with fuel consumption. We all know about the streamlined steam engines of the United States, for example Milwaukee's A-Class, Norfolk & Wessons, and the C&O's L1 Hudsons. But what about the stuff north of the border in maple syrup land? There really isn't much talk about the streamlined steam engines we had, and still sorta have, up in Canada. So with that being said, in today's video, we'll go over the few types of streamliners of the Canadian railways, as well as their US counterparts in some cases. I'm probably going to get a lot of info wrong because I don't know anything about steam engines, but hey, let's just give this a shot. Let's get started.
Vultures here! Vultures here!
CP Rail had a couple classes of streamlined steamers. We'll start off with the F1 and F2 Jubilee 444s. These guys were all built between 1936 and 1938 by the Montreal Locomotive Works and the Canadian Locomotive Company. Here's some information I forgot to put in on the Jubilees. Also, I kinda gotta talk over the music, but yeah, this is just some general quick information on these locomotives. Anyways, okay, let's get back to the video. The 5 MLW F2s actually came first, being built in 1936. The CLC F1s were built starting in late 1937 going into the spring of 38. Honestly, design-wise, these guys were like mini Royal Hudsons. Some people back then thought the designs were pleasant, while others thought they looked pretty weird. The F2s seem to have been designed for faster passenger service. Used alongside newer passenger system equipment wide, they did run the occasional freight train, I'm sure. 2 F2s were assigned between Toronto and Montreal, 2 more for Toronto to Windsor, and a single one, 3001, for Calgary to Edmonton. 3001 was one of, if not the only named modern CPR steam engine, after the train it hauled, the Chinook. The F2 class was also known for having a top speed of 112 miles an hour. In fact, 3003 and its train one fall day in 1936 holds the record for one of the fastest trains in Canada. Sadly, no F2As were ever preserved, with most going to scrap in the late 50s and early 60s with the majority of CP's steam fleet. The later F1As, however, have 2 survivors. CP 2928 is preserved pretty well at the Expo Rail Museum in Delson, Quebec. 2929, however, is in... well, just look at it. Here it is at Steamtown in Pennsylvania. I forgot the town name. You know, something really needs to be done about these engines at Steamtown, like CN47 and of course 2929 here. We can't just let these things rot away like that. The CPR Jubilees are, for some reason, one of my personal favorite CP steam engine classes. There's just something about them, you know? They've got a certain charm to them for some reason. CPR Hudsons are probably one of the most notable engines in Canadian history, not just in terms of railroading either. You for sure know of CP 2816, the H1B 464 Hudson that's actually just been operationally restored again to run a train down to Mexico City. However, we're talking about the later H1 Streamline Hudsons. Here's some quick info on the H1C, H1D, and H1E class before we continue. You finished reading yet? Yes? No? Well, too bad. Here we go. In 1939, the King and Queen of England visited Canada and rode across from Quebec City to Vancouver behind a specially painted CPR 464 number 2850. This was actually the first time a reigning monarch had visited Canada. King George VI was apparently a bit of a train enthusiast, or a foamer as normal people would call it, so he got to ride in the cab of the locomotive along the trip. The king was so impressed with everything about the Hudson that he gave CP permission to call these H1s really useful, Royal Hudsons. These are, to this date, the only engines outside of the UK to receive royal status by a reigning monarch. 2850, as you can see from the photos, got a snazzy blue variant of the CPR's passenger scheme. As for preservation, the streamlined Hudsons are unfortunately all on static display at different museums across North America. 2839 is on display in California? That is bizarre, honestly. What makes it bizarre is that it was used by the Southern Railway between 1979 and 1980 for excursions, and then ended up at a museum on display in California. Like, think about it, CP is all the way up here, the Southern's lines are all the way down here, and California is all the way out there. How? Whatever, that doesn't make sense. 2850, the Royal Trains locomotive, is on display back in the original CPR look inside Expo Rail. 2858 is at the Canadian Museum of Science and Tech in Ottawa, and 2860, the most well-known, is at the BC Railway Museum in Squamish. 2860 was actually the first built as an oil-burning genuine Royal Hudson in the early 1940s. It was retired in 1959 from regular service, brought back to life around 1973 for excursions until 1999, and then again in 2006 until 2011 when its boiler certification expired. Repairs were estimated to cost over $1 million, so unfortunately it hasn't been steamed up since then as far as I can tell. Well, now that we've covered CP, I guess it's time to move on to Oh, wait a minute, I forgot about Big Chungus over here. Canadian Railways never got any articulated steam engine. Yeah, no, I completely forgot about these guys. Well, I mean, we never got any massive articulated steam engines like the Yellowstones or stuff like that. The largest we had was the MLW-built 210-4 Selkirks. The non-streamlined ones date back to around 1929, while the later T1B and T1Cs were built around 1938 and 1949 respectively. These things were mostly assigned to work freight and passenger service in Western Canada throughout the Rocky Mountains. The 1949 T1Cs were apparently the last standard gauge steam engines built in Canada for Canadian Railway. Here's some quick info on the Selkirks. I kept forgetting to record these little segments, so yeah, just some quick info on these locomotives. Alright, let's get back to the video. These engines, like most, were retired in 1959, and all T1A, T1B, and all but 2 T1Cs were scrapped not too long after. 5931, at one point being incorrectly painted as 5934, is on static outdoor display in Calgary, while 5935, no, not that one. 5935 is on static display indoors at Expo Rail. Alright, now we can move on to the Canadian Government Railways stuff. The Canadian National and Grand Trunk Western U4s are another one of my personal favorite steam locomotive classes. CN's 5, numbered 6400 to 6404, and GTW's 5, numbered 6405 to 6410, were built in 1938 by Lima. These were for the most part used in fast passenger service on CN and GT lines. Like all of the other steam engines on CN roads, they were retired between 1960 and 1961. Luckily, there's 2 surviving examples. I know what you might be saying, isn't it just one? Well, yeah, 1 real-life example and 1 fictional example. You might also be saying, bro is actually losing his mind out here. Well, yeah, but hear me out. CN 6400 is the only real-life surviving example of the U4A. Even if it hasn't moved in years, it's one of the most significant steam engines in Canada. First off, the U4s were the first streamlined steam engines in Canada. It also gained some attention for pulling some portions of the previously mentioned 1939 Royal train while it was on CN trackage. That's pretty much all I could find for its info on its Royal run. There isn't too much readily available, let alone on CN 6400's involvement with the train. That same year, it went to the New York World Fair alongside a few other famous streamline engines. It was retired in 1960 and ended up in a deadline, ready to be cut up. Luckily, it was hand-picked by CN to be preserved. It was donated to the National Tech and Science Museum in Ottawa as a permanent static display. It remains there to this day in pretty decent cosmetic condition. As for the GTW's U4s, none survived after the end of the steam era on the GTW in the early 60s. However, one does live on in the form of Thomas and Friends. Vinny is a locomotive from the late-ish CGI era of Thomas & Friends, being introduced in 2016 with the Great Race movie. He's numbered 6407 after the GTW engine of the same number. This guy seems to be an antagonist of sorts, being nicknamed Big Bully by Thomas and some other guy I've never heard of. In the show, he's got a 5-chime whistle from Union Pacific 4466. His paint scheme, of course, is based on 6400's royal blue look, just without any real CN or royal branding, because I'm sure the showrunners wouldn't want to get sued by CN or, you know, the Queen. Honestly, I think he wasn't a really useful engine. His last appearance was in 2018's Big World Big Adventures. Yeah. So it's safe to say he went back home to the mainland and was probably cut up to build a bunch of GP9s or U30Cs or something like that. Either way, it's nice to know that this class of engine will get some acknowledgement in some way or another from people around the world watching Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. Hey, hold on a second, hold on, I forgot to put the info in for the U4s again. Oh boy. Yeah, this is some just quick information, general gibberish on these steam locomotives. Okay, back to the video.
Okay, go!
Or, I don't know, this might be the end of the video, I don't know where I'm going to put this. Since I don't know how to end videos properly, Canada's streamlined steam engines will forever be a part of the history book of Amtrak, the National Passenger Corporation. Hi guys, I'm the Winnipeg Schizo, and I'd just like to ask where I am, and to also say thanks for watching. And as always, if you enjoyed, leave a like, and feel free to subscribe for more mediocre train videos coming your way eventually, I don't know. This is the Winnipeg Rail fan saying 33-year-old CN conductors out of Duluth should not be rizzing up 16-year-old boys. Steven.
Who's got the last laugh? Let's have the fast laugh. Who's got the last laugh?